share kind of things that people would like to talk about for today. And so I created a Google Doc on there just to kind of have a visual display for us to look at and kind of keep some notes on as we talk today. Are there any questions or concerns at this point?
No.
No.
Sounds good.
Okay. So they should be starting that. And so for those of you kind of who followed the listserv, the interest in this topic emerged. There was a discussion about a job ad that kind of requested a native or native-like speaking teachers. And so we had kind of a bit of a discussion on that topic on kind of what value is nativeness in that kind of native standard in terms of being an effective writing teacher. And so we wanted to kind of broaden the discussion just beyond that topic into different areas. And so there's a pretty detailed discussion, several people involved on the listserv, and a lot of it just kind of focused on what makes effective teaching strategies. And so some people share different resources, and then one talked about the importance of kind of starting with topic and building student engagement as opposed to just focusing solely on form. And there was some people pointed out concerns and issues with that 5-paragraph essay model and the need to move away from that. And then there was also kind of strategies on teaching students to take charge of their own work and improving their own work. And some different resources people shared on there. And so I wanted to kind of start out just by inviting people to kind of share, and I'll take some notes on the doc here, questions or topics they would like to focus on for today.
Well, I'm in the hiring process, looking for adjuncts to teach in the fall, and this is Betty, by the way. And one of the things that I'm puzzling over right now is how good of a writer do you have to be in order to be a competent writing teacher? When people apply, we ask them for a CV and we ask them for an academic writing sample. And some of the writing samples are sort of give me pause. Like, there will be a person who otherwise seems completely well qualified, but I look at their own writing and I worry. So that's an issue that I'm dealing with right now.
Okay, great. Good question. Anyone else? And feel free, if we can't hear you, feel free to type in your questions as well.
Hey, this is Betsy. I think one of the things that I am still wrestling with in teaching a graduate class on teaching second language writing is how much do we balance theory with practical stuff? Because I think that as far as a good teacher goes, there's a lot of fun stuff you can do in class, there's a lot of activities, but I think there's also a lot where teachers really do have to understand a bit more about how students learn writing, how to draw on what we know about second language learning and writing learning in order to figure out the best ways for a particular group of students. And I frequently get complaints from the grad students that there's too much theory and not enough practical. But then when students come back in later years, they go, hey, I'm really glad that we learned all that theory because I've come up against situations where all the strategies that I know don't work and I had to figure something else out.
Okay, great question. Anyone else?
Hi, this is Licia.
Hi.
I would like to talk about one of the things that I struggle with in our writing program. I want my students to move away from teaching or writing as something that they will move from point A to point B, and instead maybe focusing on teaching of issues like transfer of skills, and instead of assessing like a visible mastery of writing, assessing learning and even writing about writing. I feel like that's one of the things that I'm struggling to teach my students, how they can, both my graduate students and undergraduate, when they talk about writing, how they can have their students write about their writing process. And maybe, again, focusing on more genre studies, letting students think about their learning and learning in progress as they are creating a text. Does it make sense?
I think so. Hopefully I summarized it sufficiently. Okay, and Maru has a question as well. We'll be posting that here. Anybody else? So his question is, I am teaching English to medical students in Saudi Arabia. Firstly, how can I get my students to change their pivotal attitude from just passing the language to learning the language seriously? Secondly, how can writing be made more interesting? Okay. Maybe, and we might want to go around quickly and just introduce each other, I was thinking as well. And so just kind of your name and what your basically kind of your teaching context, and if you want, why you're here today. So my name's Todd Rucker. I'm at the University of New Mexico, and so I work with L1 and L2 writers at the university level in the U.S. And so I'm particularly interested in working with kind of resident and immigrant and migrant students and helping them improve their writing.
Hi, I'm Sylvia Pessoa. I'm at Carnegie Mellon University in Qatar, where we teach first year composition courses to multilingual students. And my question is always about, transfer. How can we promote transfer of skills, writing skills that we teach in our courses to other courses across the curriculum and in the disciplines? So I certainly believe that writing development takes time, and it cannot just happen in our, first year English courses, that they need to happen in other courses, that, that instruction needs to happen in other courses and in the disciplines and all of that. But I'm always amazed whenever I interview students that when I ask them about their freshman composition course, or like if they're using any of those skills, they're like, what? What skills are you talking about? So I'm always interested in knowing how we can better do that job.
Okay, great. And then maybe we can move, if you can see the list there, we can move up from the bottom. So I went Sylvia, and then Scott, and then Ryan. Scott, are you there? Maybe we can move on to Ryan.
Scotty said, yeah, having microphone issues. Okay, I'm Ryan Miller. I teach at Kent State University in Ohio. I teach BA and MA TESOL students. I teach our second language writing class for those students, so teacher training stuff for them. That's my context, I guess.
Okay, great. And then Maru shared, he says he teaches English to preparatory year and advanced medical levels in Saudi Arabia, and consistently has challenges teaching writing with his students. And Lisha?
Yes, hi. I teach at Illinois State University, and I teach writing, second language writing graduate courses, and we also have a large writing program, first year writing composition, and I teach a graduate level course where we prepare, it's like a professional development course where we prepare first year writing instructors.
Okay, great. And Amy? She might still be having, Charlene, are you there? Hey, how about Catalina?
Hi, I'm a Master in TESOL student at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. And so far I've taught ESL writing courses to graduate students from different disciplines for just 2 semesters. So I'm still learning how to, about writing and about how to teach it as well.
Okay, great. And then Betty, and then Betsy.
Okay, hi. I am the Director of Multilingual Writing. I have a title at Bryn Mawr College, and so I'm teaching mostly undergraduates, especially working with them during their first semester. My course is sort of a companion course to their first year seminar. Yeah, that's what I do.
Thanks.
Hi, I'm Betsy Gilliland. I'm a professor at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, and now I mostly teach graduate classes in various things related to second language writing, although I also had an undergrad major class on teaching second language reading and writing this semester. But I got into all of this because I used to teach developmental writing at a state university in California, and became really fascinated with the transitions from high school to college in terms of writing and what students actually learned from their teachers. So that's why I'm really interested in actually thinking about these characteristics of a good writing teacher, or at least what a writing teacher should know or needs to know.
Okay, good. And then a couple of people weren't able, their microphones weren't working, so you can check out their introductions in the chat section on the side there. But let's go ahead and maybe get started with the first question we got today. How good of a writer do you have to be in order to be a competent writing teacher? And one of the things that came up in the online discussion, one of the earliest comments with that, the author noted the best writing teachers love to write and have an analytical mind about the difference between good, mediocre, ineffective, and effective writing. So that might be a place for us to start. Was it Betty or was it Debbie?
It's Betty, yeah, and
okay.
That was that is my question. I feel guilty about not writing enough, and when I'm looking for people to teach for me, I feel that I'm always wondering whether I'm being overly critical of them, and it's sort of, you know, in a way it sort of relates to the question of the non-native speaker when I think about, well, the actual, you know, native speaking people have, you know, some of the same and kinds of writing problems, and I just wonder, you know, sometimes whether I'm upholding an archaic standard about writing, or whether I've just, you know, been doing this too long, or whether I just have, you know, very particular tastes and I'm letting that color my my selection of staff.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and so you got applicants, and you kind of, you see, you know, you kind of look at the writing and the letters, and
yeah, for example, I see a lot of editing errors or unedited material, and I think, okay, you know, how seriously should I weigh that? I have one way of thinking about that when it's student writing, but when it's an applicant looking for employment, do I, you know, think of that as a slightly different and maybe, you know, hold them to a higher standard?
Anyone?
Yeah, anyone? Anyone else have this problem?
Or any advice for Betty in the position she's in? You know, what level, for those of you involved in hiring at all, what level do you consider, you know, when looking at application materials, for instance? What are the things you value in strong applicants?
Hey, this is Betsy. This is actually a really interesting thing that I struggled with when I went back to graduate school to do my PhD after teaching ESL and developmental writing quite a lot. I thought I was a really good writer at that point because I could write the kinds of essays my students had to write very easily. The GRE was actually quite simple because I'd been teaching students how to write the TOEFL for so long. But then I started graduate school and realized that I really didn't know how to write at a PhD level, and it took me quite a while to learn. So I think getting back to that comment from the online discussion, the analytical mind about the good, mediocre, ineffective, effective writing, I think somehow we need to be able to figure out what kind of writing is appropriate for the students, because I think what we see a lot with students in mainstream college classes is that their professors may be really good academic writers but don't have a clue how to teach learners how to write in that genre. So I'm not sure that just being a good writer is enough. I think there's got to be this understanding of what makes writing good and how to get from being at any particular point in the writing process to making writing better. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really does. I mean, I guess, still the troublesome flip side is, do you have to be able to do it yourself?
Yeah.
Or do you just have to be able to recognize it and applaud it and,
Yeah.
I mean, one of the challenges here is our undergraduates, really are required to write at a level that's more like a graduate school level in a lot of places, too. So it's not so easy just to say, well, if you write like a freshman, you can teach a freshman,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, going back to that online discussion question about being able to analyze writing versus being able to do the writing yourself. I mean, those seem like two separate things, right? And so when we, Betty asked the question, should the teacher be able to do it themselves and do what themselves? To be able to do the writing or to do the analysis of the writing? It seems like in the hiring process, you'd want to know whether they're able to do the analysis part also.
So they can teach it to the students and make it explicit for them. Because if it's not explicit to the teachers, how are they going to make it explicit to the students? And then the other thing, I don't know the kinds of infelicities or things that you're seeing in the writing of these candidates, but people might have grammatical errors, or they might have run-on sentences, whatever, because they just didn't edit their writing, but they can be good teachers. They can really motivate and inspire students to write. And we all teach writing, and it has to do with reading, and and the topics that you choose for your classes, and what students will write about, and what and the kinds of discussions that you're going to have in the class. So maybe there's someone who's a really good writer, but maybe not a good teacher, and cannot engage with the students and bring it to the level of the students and scaffold their learning and push them forward.
Mm-hmm. And maybe could be an excellent facilitator of writing, even though they don't write well themselves.
Like, I mean, I can tell you about myself. Like, I don't think I could ever do creative writing. I mean, I'm amazed at people who are creative writers and can write short stories and even like blogs. Right. I'm just not good at creative writing. It is not my strength. So I think I would never be able to teach creative writing, but I can certainly teach academic writing. And I certainly do a lot of academic writing, but don't ask me to do any creative writing because I wouldn't know where to start.
I also want to interject and maybe talk about how academic writing in itself includes so much creativity, and maybe us writing teachers can also look at writing and being a good writing from a different angle. Maybe I feel like I'm a good writer, as Sylvia said, in an academic, like writing a research paper, but how about, does that mean that I cannot teach, again, creative things? Does that mean that I cannot really talk about like business reports? Or so I don't know, I always struggle with that question. Again, how good of a writer do we need to be? Again, is there anything called good writer? I feel like,
what do you mean by good writer? I mean, do we mean the absence of grammatical errors and things like that, mistakes? I mean, going back to the original question that started with, the native speaker standard, if that's what we're looking for in the writing, examples and things like that.
Well, Michelle and I will send it off to
What's that?
Oh, wait, I think that might be coming in from the TESOL meeting.
Oh, okay.
Let me see if I can mute that. Don't listen, everyone. I can email, shoot them an email. Let's see. Okay.
Well, you know, I guess what I think of is like if someone has just sort of a workman-like command of typical rhetorical structure of an English essay, is that good enough, or should they be writing in a way that's, I don't know, not maybe elegant, but I guess with accuracy, I guess, and some sense of style?
I guess, yeah, it depends maybe on the type of writing that they're expected to teach. I don't know if you typically, we often require like writing samples when we have applicants for writing positions. So that's something to
What do you ask for in addition to the writing sample? Do you ask for like a sample lesson plan or something like that too?
Eddie?
I ask them for a sample of academic writing, and I've gotten all kinds of things from published books to book reviews to papers that they wrote in graduate school.
Okay. Yeah, I think, and it connects with Betsy's question as well. I mean, I think it's fair to kind of evaluate the writing they submit, because I mean, if they're not rhetorically savvy enough to, you know, submit an effective piece of writing for, you know, a position they're applying for, then will they be effective enough to teach their students, you know, how to write, especially in different contexts. But on the other hand, as it kind of came up earlier, I think, do they have the other knowledge to actually transfer that knowledge to their students? And so that, so I think we need to kind of consider both aspects. Their, you know, their abilities as a teacher, but then also their abilities as like, you know, a user of the language, and then their abilities as a teacher. And I think going back with the native speaker kind of standard, that's so much prioritized in, you know, so many different position advertisements, to where they'll take someone who might be more fluent in speaking the language, but then they might not have barely any knowledge of effective teaching, and they won't, you know, likelihood is they won't be as successful of a teacher without that knowledge.
Does anybody else, I have a terrible feeling that I do this, that I judge native speaking teachers by a different standard. And I wonder, I'm beginning to wonder if that's fair. Like, you know, when I see mistakes, I think, well, they shouldn't be making this mistake, when probably that's not fair if we're saying that if you're not a native speaker, it's okay, that we should also say that if you're a native speaker, that those errors are okay too. Because, I mean, what is a native speaker? You know, I mean, we all come from different backgrounds and speak slightly different Englishes.
You're kind of saying that you kind of, I guess subconsciously maybe penalize native speakers that make mistakes when you wouldn't penalize a non-native speaker that makes the same mistake.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think some of it also has to do with, though, how they present their knowledge. Because the thing I just typed in the chat box, I don't know that I've ever had a non-native speaker who pretended or claimed to know everything there is to know about grammar. They've usually been much more cautious when they come across an error that a student makes that they're not sure how to explain. They make some effort to look it up. Whereas I've seen native speaker teachers who think they know everything there is to know about grammar, and then will mark what actually isn't an error as an error and give some explanation that doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah. I don't know.
That's very helpful.
Yeah. Hopefully some of the things we've discussed have helped think through that. But I think, yeah, I mean, there's been a number of work on how native and non-native English-speaking teachers have different areas of strength sometimes, and so we need to think about, the value of having that diversity on, among our teaching faculty, and kind of helping teachers kind of, teach to their strengths and kind of working together to complement each other across the program.
I think Ryan's recommendation of asking for a lesson plan as well as a writing sample actually is a great idea, because then you can see how much are they able to operationalize what they think good writing is in terms of helping their students learn how to write better.
I think,
Because in the end, what
yeah,
you're doing
not only
you're not a writer.
Or maybe asking them to mark a paper.
yes, I was just gonna say, in some jobs they give you a paper, a student paper, and you have to mark it and then sort of annotate your feedback and explain it.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And so, I think anytime, you're thinking about hiring people, I think it's good to look at, the different aspects of their qualifications for the position. So I think, being an effective writer is important, but then also, so asking for a writing sample, but then also, as Betsy said, asking for the lesson plan gives you a better picture of your different applicants, and you're not necessarily solely considering any one characteristic. And so I think that helps make it more, open in terms of opportunities for the applicants, but then also you'll end up with better teachers as well. So maybe we can kind of move on to Betsy's question and keep that in mind. And so Betsy kind of asked us a bit about the kind of the theory practical question, where I think, Betsy, you said a lot of your graduate students kind of were fed up a little bit with the theory and were wondering why they needed to learn that.
Yep.
To be effective teachers.
And yet then they come back later and go, wow, I actually had to draw on that theory to explain something to someone. So it's in the teacher ed side of things, it's a difficult balance. And then I think that actually comes back to Betty's question of what do we look for in a good teacher? Because I feel like there are some teachers who are very stuck on formulaic writing and don't know why the 5-paragraph essay is what they're, don't know why they're teaching the 5-paragraph essay. Where someone who has a better sense of theory behind it might be able to explain, for this stage of my students' learning, they need a bit more structure, but then we talk about genre and how, you can have different numbers of paragraphs. So yeah, it's kind of from both sides, the teacher ed and the hiring of teachers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think that to the question or the conversation we had earlier about how when to look at it from all the different perspectives, can they list off a huge list of theories, but also can they react to a student's paper, and can they put it into words in a lesson plan? I think the combination of everything is a lot more powerful.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And I think of kind of that, and it came up in the online discussion, Betsy mentioned it, this idea of, people just teaching the form and not focusing on kind of the topic and what students are writing about, and the problem with just simply focusing on the form. I was reading a chapter today who used kind of new literacy studies and looked at kind of those autonomous theories of literacy, learning, and usage versus kind of the sociocultural and the socially situated models of that. And so a writing teacher who kind of comes from that very skills-based background and doesn't have the theories maybe that point to kind of the importance of situating any kind of writing in a social context, they're going to be missing something, I think, from their instruction. And so, that's an example, I think, where, having some of that theory can really make, help a teacher teach better.
Right. Reach more students.
Yeah, and I think, knowing the theories also can also, you can also then decide as a teacher which theories you're going to align yourself with and which theories you're going to affiliate yourself with and which theories are going to inform your practice. And then you'll have, sort of like, a theoretical framework and an evidence to talk about what it is that you're doing in your classes and why. And you know, it doesn't have to be one single theory, but it could be like, you know, taking in things from different theories and applying them to different situations. And I think that knowing that for someone that is getting some training and is a new teacher is important.
Another question I had as part of this is, to what, I guess, what theory does how much theory about second language writing specifically does a writing teacher need to know? I think of this because we, in our IAP, we have a few of our PhD in rhetoric students who have no experience teaching second language writing, teaching second language writing. They come, you know, from a L1 English rhetoric background, and now they're teaching our in our IAP, and I have no idea how they're doing, but I kind of wonder, what should they know in terms of second language acquisition, second language writing?
Well, I think they definitely need to take second language writing courses.
Yeah.
At least, Ryan, you need to give them a workshop.
Yeah, I know. That's what I'm going to try to do.
I think just maybe that will answer Ryan's question too a little bit and address some of the things we were talking about, balancing theory and practice. I always struggle with the theory and practice balance because many of my students think about theory as this untouchable Bible, like this goddess, like this mythical thing that they can't actually reach. And I'll try to help them break away from that view of theory and maybe help them a little bit about like personalizing their own theories, coming up with a personal develop help about that. Okay.
All right, we're back.
Okay, sorry. So maybe helping the students talk about what they do with their students, and maybe even allowing them to refute and challenge some of the theories if that doesn't work well in their own writing context. Again, that's going back to Todd's new literacy reference, situating their specific writing scenarios into a social context.
Yeah, I think it also would be wonderful if we were able to pair a class on teaching second language writing with a practicum where students are actually having graduate students are actually having a chance to teach writing, because I think that's where it really becomes relevant. If they don't, if the theories just seem, I totally agree, Lucia, that theory is a scary thing. I've had to talk even PhD students through reluctance to engage with theory because they feel like it's this set, somebody up above created it and they can't make any changes.
In the second language writing class that I taught last semester, I had my students observe a couple writing classes. I had them interview second language writing teachers, and I had them interview students who had gone through our IAP and were now taking first year composition and disciplinary classes about, I guess, differences between those different contexts, and then they wrote papers about applying the theories that we talked about in class to what those people talked about and what they observed in the classes, and that seemed to make those things a little more tangible.
Yeah, actually, just like you, Ryan, this semester I tried something different because I was struggling with this a lot. I created this academic writers partnering program with our English Language Institute because again, when I talk about second language writing theory to my pre-service teachers, they really don't have any experience with a non-native speaker, let alone responding to a writing. So we had few workshops where we invited them to our classroom and they worked on each other's papers, not only non-native speakers, but also native speakers. My own pre-service native speaking English teachers also shared some of their college writing with the non-native speakers. and I wanted them to, again, break away from that native speakerism ideology and look at writing from a more broader social perspective. So that kind of helped them to put some of the theories we've been talking into practice.
Mm-hmm. Let's, Misha, maybe would you be interested in kind of re-articulating your question and us talking about that for a few minutes?
Yeah, I mean, that's, again, I'm trying to read more on transfer studies right now, because that's one of the things that we are trying to do in the writing program here at ISU is having our students to talk about writing. Again, instead of teaching and assessing learning, assessing a specific writing product, we're trying to assess their learning and raise their awareness on again, the writing process. So I don't know exactly what I'm asking or the point that I want to make, but I think I want to talk a little bit about how we can help create writing researcher identities and moving from that traditional model of teaching writing and focusing on transfer of skills and transfer of literate activity.
Okay. Are you influenced by like Wardle's work and other? I mean,
theories, you know, cultural, historical activity theory, and some genre studies. So I'm trying to see how second language writing maybe can be discussed in those terms.
Okay. So. Any?
Yeah, maybe instead of focusing on maybe looking at how they are learning things rather than what exactly they are learning. So if we are teaching academic writing, are we teaching them in formulaic ways, or are we really focusing on certain skills and literate practices that they can transfer to different kinds of genres? So that's one of the questions that I have in terms of the transfer issue.
Do you think it matters at what level that they're getting this distinction? Do you think you have to start at a lower level with the formulaic writing and then allow them to expand as their level increases? Being in an intensive English program here, our students tend to start with the formulaic writing, and then we allow them that as they get more advanced to do that. But again, I think it's a hard transition if your program isn't program specific.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think yeah, my context is first year writing courses, and we have a lot of English native speaking writers. But yeah, I definitely agree. As a second language writer myself, I think starting with the formulaic is always helpful, but just, you know, staying there and getting stuck is scary. It's a scary
Yes.
Yeah. Just kind of think about the vilification of the 5-paragraph essay, and you know, a lot of teachers at the lower levels would argue that that's a good place for their students to start. Well, in more mainstream composition studies, that's kind of anathema. And I think one person in the online discussion said, you know, the program prohibited, you know, teaching of the 5-paragraph essay at all. And so, yeah, kind of thinking about that balance, you know, to what extent, you know, to teaching more specific forms. Where are they useful in the process, and then at what point, you know, do we transition students beyond that? And then teach them the metacognitive, you know, skills that, you know, Alicia referred to kind of in raising the question.
And I want them to be able to identify, for instance, like key features of genres using specific techniques. You know, systemic functional linguistics, or teaching them how to analyze genres so that they can, again, transfer those skills in different disciplines.
Mm-hmm. Hello? I think we hear Maru. Okay, anyone else want to?
Well, I think that's something that I've seen a lot in graduate student level writing classes, having students really focus in on their own discipline and analyze the genre and whatever writing projects they do in the writing class are connected to their own graduate study, but I feel like I haven't seen it nearly as much in undergraduate level classes, which I think is kind of where the transfer part really is so important, is helping students develop genre analysis skills that they can use when they're taking lots of different kinds of general education classes and moving into learning their learning the discipline of their major.
Yeah. Right. And I'm more familiar, I think, like Leisha, with the quote-unquote mainstream writing programs that, you know, a lot of that work's increasingly being done where we have students do genre analysis papers and things like that. And so that might be a place where, you know, especially, you know, across institutions or within one institution, kind of looking for curricular alignment between the, you know, the quote-unquote mainstream writing program and the second language writing program as well. Sometimes the curricula are very dissimilar, but, you know, I've been at institutions where the administrators have gotten in the conversation to align that curriculum in some ways as well, while providing, you know, additional scaffolding where needed. But I think there's a lot of room for conversation between kind of the two fields. There's been, you know, research and discussion in the past about how they're very separate and how kind of ideas and theories about writing will develop kind of separately in these different disciplinary contexts.
Right, because I do wonder if we can easily talk about these issues with our ELI, English Language Institute students, where they can talk about, hello?
I think you're still good.
Okay, sorry. How they can document their own learning, their own writing experiences in their first language. I think that would be a cool kind of experiment to do, talking with them, speaking with them about, again, that requires them to compose, let's say, academic text or an email, and whether they are similar in their second language. I'm not talking about like rhetorical, right, things, but more about the textual activities and the skills that they use to compose a text in the first language and how they are different from their L2 practices.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Anyone else want to add to that question before we move on? Okay. I don't know if Marus had success joining in, but he had a question, as I wrote down there in the doc, on teaching English to medical students. So, okay, and I think he kind of had a question about motivation. Would you like to talk a little bit about that, Maru?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, that's fine. That's good. Sorry about that. I was quite embarrassed. I couldn't join the meeting orally in the beginning, and now I'm finally on the Android. It's working. I'm happy to be with all of you this night. Well, my question is, you know, in Saudi Arabia, as you know, we have a problem from the syllabus as well. We are facing students from very weak backgrounds, high school backgrounds. They don't have listening and writing skills over there. And then when they come to the college and the university levels, they face textbooks from OUP and Pearson's which require writing to intermediate levels. And it's a really hard task to motivate them to you know, bring them from a simple to be verb to the present perfect and, you know, the present continuous, to make them learn and write. And finally, even if you teach them for 2 semesters or 3 semesters, you hardly see any progress or any output. And basically, the writing aspect always lags behind. And then after 2 years of graduation, a graduate comes out with hardly a proper writing knowledge or writing styles. All the time they are just, you know, they only know how to write broken language in incorrect forms and patterns. It's something which I don't know how to change it. It's I see it everywhere here in this country.
Mm-hmm.
So are they medical students in English?
Yes.
Are they going through their medical training in English?
Yes, the medical students in English, yeah.
And,
they're all medical students, yes.
And how many language writing courses do they have?
Well, we have, you know, four semesters of language courses. 4 semesters. That means 2 years almost.
Okay.
2 years of courses, but the problem is we don't have separate. We don't have separate writing sessions like as you have in the U.S. ESL writing course, you know, ESL, you know, reading session all together because the book covers it together. That's why.
Okay. So you have that integrated into your language. You feel like the writing then gets a kind of a short, doesn't get dealt with as fully as it needs to be.
Yeah. Can you hear my voice, please?
Oh yeah. Now. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, that's fine. That's good. So this is something which I don't know how to manage out because we come from. I mean, when I was in the U.S., the standard over there is different. The writing skills, the writing strategies, and the methodology is different. But coming to Arabia, things look quite different here because we have to make sure that they have to, you know, pass the class. They must understand, but at the same time, we don't see any progress in them. This is something which makes us basically demotivated teaching them.
You broke up there just briefly, but one thing it seems to be you're getting at is like just motivation and kind of having students take the language seriously.
Yeah.
Question? Okay. And so what kind of stakes, what kind of expectations are they are surrounding like their learning of English? Do they anticipate?
Well, you know, truly speaking, I mean, it's actually a pivotal change here. As I mentioned in my chat earlier, that we need change, a total change in the system here. As I said, their main thing is, you know, passing the exam, and they want to pass the exam only. They don't want to do anything else. And I'll change their attitude because unless and until a student realizes that he wants to learn the language for the sake of learning the language, only for the sake of passing the exam, I don't see any point that he will progress further. You get my point?
Yeah.
Maru, I have a quick question.
I mean,
what kind of writing is being asked from students in the exam? It's a standardized exam.
Yeah, we have see EdXL, you know.
I can't hear. Can the others hear, Maru?
I couldn't hear Maru.
It broke out, yeah. Broke up a little bit.
Are you there, Maru?
Write them down. In fact, our exams, they are supposed to listen. The listening exam is basically having listening and writing skills. That is, they have to listen and they have to write down the answers. There's no MCQs in our question papers, and most of the students, you know, they face a hard time. They're not able to write down because they can listen, but they hardly can recognize or understand what's being spoken. Hello. Yes.
What are the admission standards at your institution? So if they cannot do that, these like basic English skills, how can they take biology and chemistry and other classes in the medical field in English?
The problem is they have English, but the teachers in the biology and physics and chemistry, you know, they use L1 in the classes. You see, that is a problem. We have L2 as I mean, we use English, we teach English, but then when it comes to biology, chemistry, they have English textbooks, but the teacher, he uses most of the time, he speaks in L1, translating the material to L1 and you know, making them memorize L2. eventually what happens is when they come out of the class, then they know.
Maru.
Hello?
You might have gotten. So yeah.
Well, Maruf, if you're listening, I recommend you can talk to.
I think I give you a hard question to ask. I'm sorry if I really.
You can talk. I mean, I recommend please email me, and I can with faculty here in Qatar who teach at the Cornell Medical School. So they might have strategies that they're using in their English classes and the classes to help, students weaker English skills. It's just that here I think our admissions standards are quite high, but there might be things that you can learn from how it's being done here in Qatar at the medical school.
So right.
Okay. Yes.
I think if I
another question.
Point. I'm sorry. There's an internet problem. Yes.
Okay. Did someone else?
I was just thinking. I was wondering what kind of writing will they actually need to do in the future? What genres will they need to write, or what text will they need to write? I mean, in future classes or as a medical doctor. I mean, maybe learning those kinds of genres would be motivating in some way because it's closer to what they're actually going to have to do in the future. Something like that.
I know in our intensive English program we struggle with student attitudes too, in that they don't actually think they'll have to write in order to get through an undergraduate or a graduate program, and they fight us, sort of right in his question where he wanted to change their attitude from just passing the test to actually using the language. They fight us in our intensive English program and then come back years later and say, oh, thank you for teaching me that, it was helpful. So it's almost an attitude thing too, and how do you change their motivation? I think that's around the world too.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's the challenge of being a good teacher, I think, and something that good teachers do well is thinking of ways and do a good job motivating their students.
Yeah.
They don't always have that kind of inherent motivation, maybe at the graduate level, but outside of that, that's a constant challenge, I think.
Right.
Sometimes I feel with our students here is that they're highly motivated for our English classes because it's such a break from everything that they have to do in their very math intense courses and programming courses where many times they're struggling, and then the academic reading and writing course is the sort of the course where they feel, oh, I understand this, I follow this, I work hard, and I see results. So sometimes, it can have the opposing effect.
Mm-hmm. We just have a few more minutes for the conversation. Are there any other kind of, I know, Sylvia, you had a question down. I think it related a little bit to Licia.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it throughout, so really there's no need to address it. Mm-hmm.
Anyone want to make any comments?
Can I bring up something about Maruf's question? It seemed like in the way he was describing writing, there was a lot of overlap between grammar and writing, and would there be value in separating those out between grammar issues versus writing issues?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I don't know. I mean, that's
because
And Maru, your last question, how can writing be made more interesting, is something that I ask every day. And I think that to me, it starts with having a really honest conversation with my students about how writing is a real-world literacy event and how they are all writers. We're just helping them to figure out certain skills that will help them to be better in different genres. So I think just having that conversation about how writing is a real-world related event and how they do write every day. They write Facebook status, they write emails, and maybe having that conversation might help. I don't know.
Or using those mediums to practice writing as part of the class.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other kind of final thoughts or reflections on our discussion?
Oh, thank you everyone for waking me up. It was a very insightful conversation.
I enjoyed this.
And what we'll
arranging. I hope we have a second one or third one and more.
Yeah, we'll definitely continue these. We got some better.
Really, thank you for your time, and I really thank Todd and everybody for the discussion. I would really like this to happen again. Really, very informative, and maybe I can discuss some other issues next time.
Okay, so I'm always, please feel free to send me ideas for discussion topics for future months, or else just kind of ideas or general feedback on the structure of our conversation today as well. And feel free to, if something wasn't answered or you'd like to explore something a little more, feel free to chime in on the listserv as well and keep that discussion going. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a nice day, everyone. Good night.
Our night, yeah.
Night.
Good night, everybody.
Bye.